Hey everybody. Hey, what's Bill up to today? Well, Bill is up to changing the steering rack on my wife's 2004 Acura TL. Now, I've already taken the old one out. I am not a mechanic with a garage with a lift, and of course this all had to be done laying on the ground with some jack stands underneath holding up the car. Now, I've already put the new one in. It was not a real easy task. The only hard part was getting it out. Loosening up the bolts that had to be loosened wasn't that bad. And in fact, if you watch other videos, there's one I just got finished watching to get some insight on how to do this job. He had the rack, or had the car up on a rack and attacked the bolts that hold the steering rack in. He attacked them from the bottom. I attacked it from the top. I got a piece of cardboard, laid it on top of the engine, stood on a tire. I lay on the cardboard and get this long extension socket down to loosen up the two bolts that are holding on the steering rack to the frame. Now, if you watch other videos, they're going to tell you that you have to drop down the subframe somewhat on both sides. I've found that you don't have to do that. The only thing that I loosened up to get the steering rack off and to drop the subframe somewhat was those two bolts right there, which are holding the transmission mount. I did not take them out, I just loosened them. I just loosened them enough and then loosened up the other mount, which is under here in my oil pan. That rack, or that mount right there that goes onto that bushing. The trick is, and they'll tell you in those other videos, that you got to use a pry bar to pry this part of the subframe down. Well, while I was laying on the ground struggling with that, God inspired me. That's all I have to give him the credit for, because I would have never thought of it. What I did was take my crow's foot, which is still on the subframe right now, wedged up between the subframe and the bottom of the frame, and I put the end of it on my floor jack, my hydraulic floor jack, right inside the cup. And as I jacked up the floor jack, well, it just fell out. But what happens is, you get the idea, the subframe starts to come down. And it came down just enough for me to go over and pull out the old steering rack. Now I have the other steering rack in. It provided just enough clearance for me to twist it a little bit. I'm working by myself, did not have anybody else with me. And I just finished from the top side putting the lines back on, the the fluid lines back on the new steering rack. It's not a Honda steering rack. I got this from I think Parts Geek, or no, actually it wasn't Parts Geek, it was something steering. I forgot what it was. In fact, the old box is right there where it came into the mail yesterday. So I did not do a lot of what the other videos are saying that you have to do to get it off. I was actually fortunate enough to be able to just loosen one part of the subframe down just enough to get the old rack out. If you give it just enough clearance and twist it a couple of times, it will come out. And I did not have anybody on the other side pushing it out for me. I did not loosen up the bushing up the front or take the wishbone nut or bolt out of the lower control arm. Did not do that either. Like I said, I got most of my clearance by wedging. Actually, there's a couple of pieces of wood up on the top side of that the subframe. I loosened it by taking a crow's foot, just like that, wedging it up inside and putting the bottom of it on my hydraulic floor jack. obviously I got it in there tight enough so it wouldn't slip out, and I started to jack it up ever so slowly, and at that point you can see the subframe starting to lower itself down. And at that point, then when I went around to the tunnel here and dragged out or pulled out the old steering rack. So there you are. You should be able to do it. If you have any questions, just leave a comment. I'll be happy to ask them or answer them for you. Yes, it did take me, I have been working on this for a couple of days, not a couple of days straight, because I had other things to do. But today I decided I'm finishing this job up. And once I got the knowledge and the inspiration from God above to lower that subframe the way I just did with my floor jack, the rack came right out, no problem. So I hope that helps you if you're dealing with it. This is a 2004 Acura TL. Also, one other thing I'd like to mention, the other video I was watching where the guy was working on the 06 TL, he transferred over some kind of return line from the old rack to the new rack. One of these return lines here. My rack came with these already intact, so I did not have to transfer over anything except for that rubber boot that goes right there on the mechanism that attaches to the bottom of the steering shaft. So there you have it. I am almost done this job. I'm so glad. Of course, now I have to change the oil pan because it's leaking as well on the drain nut, but that's another story. So hopefully this all helps you out on your Acura TL. And again, subscribe, leave me comments, questions, and I'll be happy to get back to you.